everybody. I'm so excited to be here to present for K-12 Online. I feel like it's old home week, with Dean Sheresky doing one of the keynote presentations, and then Darren Kirpatwa there. It wasn't too long ago that the three of us, were with Wes Fryer, and we were in the depths of doing what Wes and his gang are doing now, putting K-12 together. And so it really does feel exciting coming home and doing this presentation. So I'm honored to be one of the workshop presenters in the leadership strand. My presentation is going to be a little bit different in that I'm actually featuring Alec Carose's open leadership course as part of my presentation. I was fortunate enough to be asked to come and present for him and his students, and we recorded it using Illuminate. And so I thought, some of the concepts that I went over with his class is what I would be going over with you. And I thought we could put the two of those things together, let you as educational leaders see what an open leadership course looks like. We'll talk to Alec, find out a little bit about his paradigm and philosophy for why he set something like that up. And then you could kind of see it in action and see what it looks like, at least one portion of it, because there's a whole lot of behind the scenes and connected learning that goes on that won't be represented in the course. But that'll be pretty exciting. I do have Alec here now, and you can probably see him on the screen. So
hi, everyone.
There he is. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to him. And Alec, I wondered if you'd tell us a little bit about your philosophy and ideas behind both open learning and why you created this course. I think this is probably your second or third year doing it.
Yeah, third time actually. Yeah. Thanks, Sheryl. It's just great to be here. So hi, everyone. I get a chance to actually talk about what I'm really passionate about. So I'm so glad to be here. So as Sheryl mentioned, I teach an open graduate course, and it's based at the University of Regina in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. And the course is around social media, open education, leadership. But I really want to get it to sort of the key ideas of why this course ever evolved in the first place. And then I saw actually a quote from, I think it was David Hargreaves. And he said, basically, a key to transformation is for the teaching profession to establish innovation networks that capture the spirit and the culture of hackers. And when they're talking about hackers, they're not talking about sort of the bad hackers. They're talking about programmers. The passion, the can-do, the collective sharing. And this was way before Twitter or Facebook and all of these other tools have made it really easy. But the passion and the spirit of that collective sharing is really, you see it everywhere now. And it's just amazing to see. So I think that's where I kind of started. I don't know if you want me to continue on from this point.
Yeah, I think
Sure.
It's very interesting to know where you got started, and it really helps me. Alec and I have a chance to work together. He's one of the co-directors of community development and powerful learning practice, a professional development company that I co-founded with Will Richardson. And so being able to hear the background in what makes him tick and how he really thinks, his philosophy of education, is very helpful to me, and I think it will be to you. So Alec, when you have these ideas congealing and you're really thinking about what's going on, what brought you to the point of doing a course through your university, because you teach at the University of Regina, right, to make it open where other people from around the world could participate? Where did that idea come into the scene?
Sure. So part of it was the philosophy, really, of as professors, we have a lot of privilege. I mean, we can teach to our students. We get to play with knowledge on a daily basis, but there are many people who don't have access. So one of the key ideas for this was access, and also the whole idea of low cost. So not just about giving students that have access to it normally, but also having other teachers being enabled to create courses themselves and doing this themselves. So taking an open course, seeing how it is all built, making the entire process transparent, and then being able to build something your own. So that idea of open access was really important. Also, establishing roles for people who take it for a non-credit. This year, we actually created something called the Network Mentor Project, where all the people who signed up, well, not all of the people who really wanted to become mentors, we have about 24 credit students, so people who are taking it for credit, and we ended up having about 220 people who are taking it for non-credit and who decided to become network mentors. And so by giving those people a role, they actually participate, they comment on blogs, they participate on Twitter, they help people on their assessments. They're doing a number of things to really help the learning experience for the people taking it for credit become better. Oh, yeah. And I think that really shows, some dedication of learning. No, these people aren't taking it for credit. They're just doing it because they love learning. And then I'm hoping, the big deal of the course really is what happens beyond this. Normally you have a 4-month course, and it's sort of a time-served model. You do your time, you get your credit, and you get out. And you're not really thinking about that community that builds beyond that. So really the big thing is the hope and development of a sustainable long-term learning connection amongst these students. So people who are across the world taking the same experience, this open educational experience, can somehow connect throughout the next few months, few years, however long they have some shared connection.
So it's really sustainable. It's long-term,
It has
almost
been
job-embedded kind of experience.
Definitely job embedded, and the assessments are directly job embedded. Very important.
So the last question I want to ask you is then,
Sure.
So what's in this for educational leaders who are watching this now? Obviously, you teach at a university level. In a K through 12 setting, is there an application?
Absolutely. I think what's really important about this, what I'm trying to build is a community that really gives back to itself. And so people from this course will go into their classrooms, and they'll make those connections that they made in the class, and they'll bring their students. It's a sort of a regenerating gift economy where I'm creating something, I'm paying forward for all of these people to come and, for yourself, for instance, to come into my class and give your time, and all of the other people that I've invited as well, and all of the mentors. I've hopefully given them something back by the things that I do, by sharing and collaborating. And whenever someone asks me for a webcam like this, sort of a conversation, I try to say yes and try to do that within my time limits. But by doing this, you create this total gift economy that keeps on giving. You pay forward, and hopefully in the future you'll be able to, really make this happen with your students. I mean, it just makes so much sense. So really, in terms of leadership, you make everyone a leader. You make everyone a contributor. You make everyone a sharer, and of course, that just helps education altogether.
It's great. So, I think it brings such validity to the process. Well, in the light of that, I hope that you'll enjoy listening to my presentation, which I'm going to talk about connected learning communities, and which was what I was invited to do to Alex's class. And I want you to understand in the presentation the difference between communities and networks as a professional development model. So when you're setting up professional development for your teachers, this is the kind of thing you're going to look at. I'm also going to talk about the model of a learning ecology, because I really believe that we need to be moving class from a classroom structure into a community model with our students and our teachers, and even as a learning organization. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, the different types of virtual learning communities, how a community evolves, and then some characteristics of a healthy community. So I hope you enjoy. We're going to give you an inside view of what an open learning course looks like, and give you a little bit of content too, and then I'll see you at the end of this as well. Hope you enjoy. Thanks.
Bye.
When we're talking about connected learners and being a network learner and learning together in connected spaces, it really does change the dispositions and values and beliefs that we as learners bring to the table. Old school, the certain values and beliefs is that the student is a very passive participant in the process, and that the knowledge flows from the person at the front of the room, the teacher or the professor. And when you become a connected learner, the dispositions change completely. Take a look at these on this slide and you'll kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. I think one of the most powerful that's here is this idea of perseverance. That when you're a connected learner, it's not a passive activity at all, that it requires a deep thought. It requires constant revising and rethinking, repacking. And we really do have to resist the urge to finish prematurely, because we're used to reading the chapter and answering the questions at the end. And when you're in a connected learning environment, there are very messy, unique conversations taking place. There's an inclination towards being open-minded, a dedication to the development of expertise. You become a co-learner, a co-leader, a co-creator. It takes courage and transparency. And all these things are very much a shift in the kinds of dispositions and values that we bring to the table as learners. And yet it's something that's going to be very valuable to us as we go through that process of learning in connected learning communities.
What is community, and what does it mean when we learn in community, and what does it mean when I help set up communities for people to learn in? And so that's the direction that I kind of want to take right there. So for me, And this is what we do in Powerful Learning Practice, the professional development company that I co-founded with Will Richardson. For us, when we put people together, we put them in connected learning communities. You know, it used to be that we would say, well, this is what we do. We have this professional learning community piece, and we have this community of practice thing, and we also get people out in the network. We do this professional learning network piece, and it was just too much to talk about. So in the new book that I'm writing, I've coined the phrase connected learning communities, CLCs. And that for me is going to be a collective phrase that means that three-pronged approach. That if you're going to learn in communities, if you're going to be doing knowledge building in online spaces, it needs to be a three-pronged approach to professional development. Here's how, in my mind, it needs to work. First of all, nothing takes the place of professional learning communities. Professional learning communities are in a face-to-face capacity. It's groups of individuals within a local context that are going to take what they're learning and they're going to apply it to that context. So you just can't throw out what you're doing, that participatory work 2.0. You've got to say, okay, I've got to have regular conversations and eyeball the people that I'm working with to make sure that we are growing and learning and bringing what we learned from our communities and networks back to that local context. It also means global communities of practice. It's coming together in a very networked, walled garden space, learning socially to a group of people that I've made a commitment to. And we're going to see that as I describe this, I see the global community of practice or inquiry as being people that they know that I'm in their community and I know they're in my community. All right? And then personal learning networks. That I also think that we have to take initiative from a very individual perspective for our own professional development, that we're not going to get a lot of what we need in our workplace necessarily. And so we as educators take responsibility for that, that we act out the lifelong learning that we want to get from our students. All right? So professional learning communities, for me, are local, face-to-face, and they're collective. Communities of practice are online. They go very deep and they're collective. And then personal learning networks go online. They usually relate to nodes, and they're very individual in that individuals pick and choose. So knowledge building that happens in connected learning communities is passive, reflective, and active. And this is the basic this one page is the basic premise for everything else that I'm going to talk about. Mike, I'm going to tell you what nodes are. So I think that if you look at this, you're going to see that. Now, in terms of the managers support communities of practice, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I see roles and the kinds of things that you need to have when you're learning in communities. But there's two ways to really go when you approach something that you're sharing. You either can start with the big idea and dissect it down a little bit at a time, precept upon precept, or you can start with precepts and build and build and build to the big idea. So this one slide, I'm taking the approach, this is appealing to you big idea people. Here it is. This is the big idea. Now I'm going to dissect it for you, okay? So to do that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to start with defining a community and defining a network. Community and network are very overused terms. You hear people throw them around. People talk about their network. They talk about their community. You see the guys on Sprint following this guy around that are part of his network. I mean, we have different ideas. And what I'd like for you guys to do is come to some working definition. I think that it's important, even though it's an emerging topic, for us to have a common language when we're discussing these things. Just so you know, the jury's still out. There's a lot of emergent research. We're all starting to figure this out. This is the topic of my dissertation. This is something I'm incredibly passionate about. But I want to hear your viewpoints. How would you define community? How would you define networks? And are they the same thing? Are there crossover places? Or are they very distinct and different? All right, so you guys can either type it in the chat window or grab the mic.
I know that for me, even outside of the online world, whenever I would hear about networking evenings or that kind of thing, I always thought of networks as something very professional. There's something that you want to get from the people in your network, whereas your community there's also this idea that there's a deeper sense of caring that goes along with that.
Okay, so I like that. Communities are more intimate, networks are more professional. I think Jamie agreed with you just a minute ago with that. I may have a crisis here. There, I solved it. My battery went. I have a green battery. You have to turn it on. I guess we forgot. Some people are saying that communities are based on tradition and caring. Shelley says both have a common goal. So it's interesting. I love what T.A. Murray says, where there's a connection, where community is the bigger part of what we draw from our networks. So are we in agreement then that communities and networks are different entities, but yet they cross over? I mean, what is a network from your perspective? Somebody describe networks. Maybe somebody could grab the mic and talk about that. So what Brian's saying is that networks actually, in his mind, connect communities together. So you have this networking infrastructure that connects communities. Nancy White says it a little bit differently, Brian. What she says is that it's out of networks that fall communities, that it's from the connections that you make in network spaces that then that deep intimacy that somebody, I think it was one something, I can't remember the rest of it, sorry, that she was describing, that intimacy grows. All right? Anybody else want to take a stab at it? All right, so Stefan sees the community as a group of equals, and the network has some hierarchy to it. Barbara, I know you know a lot about this, so I'm glad you finally weighed in right there. Do you mind taking the mic and talking about that? Basically, she says that communities, if you're thinking in visual means, communities are round and networks are spiky. And that is when you look at social networking visualization tools that help you look at that, you see that phenomena. So that's very, very right on. So as I said, this is an emergent topic, but for the sake of our common language, this is the way that I describe it. And I'm obviously not going to read this to you, but the general conception is that when you're talking about community, that it is a group of people who have a common bond that come together. And I really like the Wikipedia definition down there. It's funny because every time I show this, Will tells people that the reason I like the community definition is because I wrote it in Wikipedia, and that absolutely is not true. I did not do that. But what I like here is where it talks about that the process of social learning that occurs when people who have a common interest. So social learning being that it's that we are social learners, that it's built on the research of social learning theory, Bandura and others, that says that when people learn, they love to learn in a social context. That occurs when people who have a common interest, that in community we typically come together around some commonality. It might be a subject or a problem, and that it's over an extended period. So it's not very task-oriented. It's not like we're going to be together for a week or even a course, unless the course maybe goes job embedded over the course of a year. But we come together to collaborate over an extended period to first share ideas, and I think this is developmental, find solutions, and then build innovations. So I think that this is a very important piece here, that we're making a commitment to each other in a community. We're intimate. We get to know each other. I don't get to pick who's in my community. It's like family. I'm sort of given my community. But together we start out just sharing ideas at first, sharing a resource. We haven't really gotten to that hard conversation thing we talked about earlier. But then as we build trust, we start to talk about what's working, what's not working. We find solutions, and eventually we actually build innovations. We transform what it is that we're doing together, whether it's a possibility or if it's a issue or a problem. And that's one thing that I would put in here too, is that I think that this idea of where they've got subject or problem, I think we need to insert in there possibility. You know, so often in education, we're very diagnostic in our approach. What we do is we get kids or we get teachers and we say, okay, this is where you are, this is where you need to be, so I'm going to teach to the gap. And when we do that, we only ever achieve mediocrity. There's no excellence there. Anybody in sports will tell you that if you want to achieve excellence, you have players play to their strengths, not their weaknesses. And yet in education, we have people play to their weaknesses. And so anytime that you're having somebody concentrate on weaknesses rather than strengths, it's going to be mediocrity. So I would say that what we really need to do is when we're working together in these communities, that we need to also look at possibilities. And that when we do that, we'll be building innovations more often than we will just finding solutions or trying to solve problems. The difference here is when we're talking about networks, is that networks can be made up of nodes, which can be learning objects. Somebody asked earlier, what's a node? It can be a learning object. It could be an RSS feed. It could be a blog stream. It could be a Ustream stream. It could be an individual. It could be a Twitter feed. So my nodes, it's made up of a group of nodes. It can be people or resources, and that's different. In communities, it's people. In networks, I can have resources, so it's data, images, feelings, and that I connect those together. The main difference for me is that in a network, I pick and choose. See, networks are very much individual motivated, where communities are collective motivated. As an individual, I can pick and choose individuals or individual learning objects, and I may not have very many, but there are things I'm passionate about. In a community, not so much. Communities are really built around practice. That's why it's called a community of practice, so that you might have a community of shipbuilders or a community of dry cleaner workers. But together, they come together and they form a practice. So it's community, we're moving together and committed in extended period and sharing ideas of practice. And the practice piece is what's really important there, because it's around being committed to becoming better educators, becoming better at the craft that we're doing. A lot of people think communities is where we just all share resources or we talk about tools or that kind of thing. Communities actually move. They have a place that they start, and then they end up somewhere very different. So there's this transformational piece. All right? So connectivism is a new learning theory that actually George Siemens, Stephen Downes, and Terry Anderson and others are looking at, where they feel like instead of just your cognitive learning theory or behaviorism, some of those things, that this is actually going to be a theory of learning in networks and what that looks like, and that it's something very real and something very different. And so in that three-pronged approach, here's what I saw. I saw that when people came together in professional learning communities in their schools, the kind of community that you think of when you think of Hord's work or DeFore, you would find that they would have very powerful conversations, but if it was something that was being done to them rather than something that the teachers did themselves, and I think that professional learning communities should be done from the inside, the teachers should be defining what their shared vision is and that kind of thing, and when it's done that way, it truly is the best hope for reculturing schools that you can have. I also think, and this comes from Terry Anderson's work, that this idea of communities of inquiry, where we really are looking at global communities of practice, where we bring people together for deep learning in a strong community, often in a walled garden approach, just so that we can, have that trust element there, that you're going to see true deep transformation in the learner. So I think those go together. And then I think personal learning networks is the third piece. I don't think you can have one without the other. I think the problem is we threw professional learning communities out there and we go, well, that didn't really do a lot to change teacher practice. It really didn't work. And then we said, okay, well, let's get in these online spaces. And Wenger came up with the whole idea of communities of practice, and he really looked at that, and the education community sort of poo-pooed it. And then what happened was the business world picked it up. We had the old knowledge management that fit in with that. And then now educators are coming back to it, and we're looking at like Seth Godin says that, community leaders is going to be one of the top jobs, in the very near future, and everybody's talking about learning in communities. But that alone isn't going to do it, because we also have to get outside the community for that very rich networking experience. We have to learn in personal learning networks. I don't know have any of you smiled together. So it used to be that when I graduated from my pre-service program, when I was in graduate school, that I had to know what I knew. And if I knew what I knew, that was good enough. But now it's not good enough anymore. Now I have to know not only what I know, but I need to know what you know, that's networking, and I need to know who you know as much as I need to know what you know. So there's so many levels now that weren't there before. And they were so involved in their own individual learning, their own individual piece, that they couldn't see the big picture. And the next level he talks about, which I think is communities of practice, is where he talks about that people say, we're great. And that's more of a community perspective. It's that none of us are as good as all of us. And the highest level that Logan talks about is life's great. And that's where you network people together. So Brian said earlier that you have communities network together. So a life great example would be of communities and networks is that I say, oh man, do you know Brian? He's really into this, this, and this. And then I say, you ought to know him because you're interested in this, this, and this. And I network those people together. So it used to be that when I graduated from my pre-service program, when I was in graduate school, that I had to know what I knew. And if I knew what I knew, that was good enough. But now it's not good enough anymore. Now I have to know not only what I know, but I need to know what you know, that's networking, and I need to know who you know as much as I need to know what you know. So there's so many levels now that weren't there before. Just to underscore this, and then I want to open it up to questions, Cochran, Smith, and Little did some research, and what they looked at is they looked at 3 ways of constructing knowledge. And they said the 3 ways that you need to construct knowledge is knowledge for practice, knowledge in practice, and knowledge of practice. It closely aligns with my idea about community, where you have communities, professional learning communities, communities of practice, professional learning communities, and personal learning networks. So knowledge for practice is the traditional professional development, the sit and get, or reading a book, where we passively sit and listen. And I used to think that was old school. I used to think that was so last year. I used to think that that was not good. And what I've come to believe now is that knowledge for practice is very necessary. That if I truly want to have something of value to bring to the table when I come to my community, then I need to have spent some time sitting and getting, passively learning. So passive has its place. But alone, that's not going to work. That I have to add to that the knowledge in practice. And knowledge in practice is where it's where you're going to contextualize, like I asked you in the beginning. It's where you're taking what you're learning in Alex's class, that you're taking what you're learning from your Twitter network, from the people that you read their blogs, and then you take it back to the classroom and you really start to test it. You start to do some things with it, and you are constructing knowledge while doing. And that's building knowledge in practice, and it's powerful. And then there needs to be a way, like professional learning communities, in a face-to-face context for teachers to share what they're learning while they're constructing knowledge in practice. But the piece that I never see is this idea of knowledge of practice. Yeah, 1% yellow, I think knowledge in practice is research too. I do. I think that that's there. But I think this knowledge of practice where we do systemic inquiry, where we are in global communities of inquiry, we're in global communities of practice, and we systemically study our own classroom teaching practices. It moves us beyond just the basics. And it's really going to bring us to the place of those dispositions we looked at earlier of the connected learner. So what we're going for is what George Siemens' graphic here represents. We're really shooting for a learning ecology. That when you're learning in a community, it isn't just informal, everybody talking to each other and sharing what they're knowing. It isn't formal, like this is kind of, where I'm giving you information and you guys are politely listening and having some back channel chat. But it's also about learning in communities. It's about self-directed learning. It's about mentoring or apprenticing. It's learning about memorization of facts and learning about communities and doing your graduate coursework, as well as learning to be. That because I'm doing knowledge of practice, that I'm systemically studying the craft or the practice of being an educator, I am learning to be a teacher by doing what teachers do. I am learning to be a scientist by doing what scientists do. And that I'm learning to be a journalist by doing what journalists do, right. And so I think that is what we're striving for, that the community aspect is really going to help us get to the place where we can create that learning ecology. And I think that is a very important piece. There are different kinds of communities. There's communities of relationship, communities of place, communities of passion. The bottom line, and this is actually Barbara Deuce's slide, that talks about the bottom line, you want to look at formal learning experiences and informal. And I love the way she describes this, where she says that in formal learning experiences, you go where the bus goes. But that informal learning experiences, you actually go where you choose. And when you're in a community, when you're doing the three-pronged approach to professional development, when you're learning in networks, communities, and face-to-face and personal learning communities, you need to have a good mix of all these. You also need to have a multi-channeled approach. Some of it's face-to-face, some of it is with the tool set, lots of different approaches to it. Wikis. There's some great work out there from Chen and Gilbert that have really looked at this, and Sable, that have really looked at how you can use a wiki to build communities. And I had an opportunity to work with these folks, some work that I did with CLT, and a very fantastic study of how they actually created almost like a Candyland game and had their graduate classes work through this. Wikis are very powerful in the way that you can organize information, or you can use sites like Ning and other whitelist applications that'll build community. The idea is, and I'll close with these two thoughts, is that when you are building community, though, you want to start out with very loose governance. In the beginning, when you're setting up your communities and you're bringing people in, you're going to have it where maybe you've got a community organizer, there's some imposed norms, the learner at first is kind of passive receiver, but you need to build for evolution. See, it's co-created content that really builds the sense of community. So as you build for evolution, you're going to find that the participant leaders will start to emerge in the conversations, that there will be shared norms and values, that learner becomes a co-creator instead of just a passive receiver, and that as this community develops, then it's going to become member-owned rather than leader-owned. It'll be, co-created norms that evolve, that the learner becomes an innovator, and that it's really self-regulated. So that in the end, you end up with a truly healthy community of practice, one that has a clear purpose, that has a shared history, that there's lots of collaboration and participation, that people feel a sense of ownership, and like we said earlier, and I think somebody said it very well, is that it's not externally imposed. It's not something being done to you, but it's something that truly everybody has ownership in and is a part of.
So I hope you enjoyed that presentation. I know it was fast and furious, but the good news is that I've created a page for you on my wiki that's going to have the original full-blown Luminate session archive of Alex Clash. You'll get to see him in action, talking to his students ahead of time and after, and my presentation, as well as having access to all the other guest speakers that he had as part of that course. So the place I want you to go for that is going to be here on my wiki. And so I'm just going to move myself out of the way, and you'll notice that this is the wiki right here. The address for the wiki is down here. I've made it a little bit bigger for you. It's 21st Century Learning Wikispaces.com. So 21st Century Learning, one word, .wikispaces.com. And when you look on the wiki, right underneath upcoming presentations, you're going to see K-12 Online. When you click on that, you'll have access, you'll be able to access resources to everything that was in this presentation, as well as everything that's in what Alex's course is about, and supporting materials, research, plus take your time, go through everything that's on the wiki. It's got a Creative Commons share and share alike license. So anything that's there that you want to mix, use, remix, you can do that as long as you give people the same rights in their licensing, and that you do it for non-commercial purposes. So I hope you enjoyed this. I enjoyed it too. My blog and everything else that you need to get in touch with me is also on the wiki. So I'll see you online. Thanks a lot. Bye.
and